All right. Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me. We're just getting set with some last technical details, but in a very short moment, we will start the Hangout on air. So just give us a few seconds. Perfect. So I am getting the go-ahead from my colleagues that we can start. So welcome, everybody. First of all, my name is David Steinacker, and I am the Senior Partner Manager for Google for Sub-Saharan Africa here on the monetization side. And a warm welcome from our European headquarters here in Dublin. So for all of you who've been here, you know where I am right now, and beautiful, good old Ireland. This is the first ever Hangout on air, actually, that we're providing for the continent on our monetization solutions. So myself, I work with some of our large publishers in the region, actually across all countries, but obviously focusing on some of the big markets. And today, what we actually want to do is we have a roughly half an hour presentation for you about some best practices surrounding AdSense. So today is going to focus on AdSense. And at the end, also, we have asked you in the invitation to submit some questions. And I've pre-selected a few, so I'll start with those. And then the floor is open to your question as well. So you can see down below, there is a form or link for you to submit your questions. So please feel free throughout the session, either straight away or at any point during the Hangout, feel free to submit your questions. And as I said, at the end, when we do the Q&A, I will try and go through as many as I can and hopefully be able to help you today as well. Just a quick note in the beginning. Also, you can see another link down below under this video where you have access to the AdSense guide to mobile success. So this is a free ebook that you can get, that you can download. Yeah, it will have a lot of more information than what we can provide you today with. So feel free to go and download it as well. And also, I would like to hear at the end of the session how you found it. You know, you can give us a quick feedback there as well. So with that, I would say, let's get started. So AdSense best practices, as I said, what we're going to cover today is a couple of recommendations, let's say, and best practices that we, of course, can see through working with hundreds and thousands of publishers across the world, but also, most importantly, with the largest publishers in Sub-Saharan Africa. So first of all, you know that Google is always talks about user experience. So UX is very, very key for us. But what does it really mean? And these are just obviously a few pointers for you. What is a good user experience? Because at the end of the day, you know, in as much as we want to talk to you about monetization and we want to make money together with you, but key to all of this is that the users have actually a great experience on your site. So number one, you all know about mobile. So obviously, ideally, you should be opting for a responsive or at least a mobile site, especially in SSA. About 70 to 80% of the traffic in most countries is via mobile devices. So if your site is not optimized for those devices, isn't responsive, you're really going to be losing out. And this is also, by the way, reflected by our algorithms. You know, if your site isn't optimized, that will have an impact on that as well. You generally should make it very easy for users, of course, to find content. Always be aware, why are users exactly coming on your page, right? What are they trying to find? And don't assume from the get-go. Try to, even if you have to, you know, you can do some surveys or something to try to find out, but really put yourself in the shoe as if you were going on your website for the first time, or get friends to do that. Very important that you provide the right content in the right place. Thirdly, another very, very important point that I always stress when I talk to my clients is make it fast. And I know, of course, this can be tricky in some of the local markets. You know, there are obviously bandwidth problems and so forth. But generally speaking, at least from a technical point of view, you should try and make your site as fast as possible, right? Because speed does not only impact on search as well, on search ranking, but also on monetization. So sites that are faster, our algorithms assume, of course, that already provides a better user experience. And therefore, you know, we consider those sites to be better. So, and I'll actually come to that in a second to tell you exactly how you can do this. And lastly, organic search, of course, you know, again, this is not something we cover today, but try to obviously optimize your site for that as well. And you can play around with design, but I think this is needless to say. Now, I mentioned earlier, speed is very important, and this is, I really want to put a focus on this today here. Google actually provides you with a free tool where you can not only test the speed of your site, but also get real-time information on what to improve. So this is what we call page speed insights. You can find this if you just Google Page Speed Insights. You should find the link, should be the first link. It's free for you to use. All you have to do is put the URL in the little field that you can see there, and it will take a few seconds, and we'll give you a score out of 100. So I've done it here for CNN. Shockingly, it's a very low score, but I'll be speaking to CNN in a bit about this. But anyway, so basically you get a score for your site, how good it ranks on mobile and desktop. And as you can see there down below, it actually also gives you concrete steps on what you actually need to do to improve the score. Generally speaking, I often get asked, okay, well, so what is a good score, right? Because I mean, 50 could be good. Does it have to be 90? I would say for Sub-Saharan Africa, you should aim to go at least above 70. Okay, this should be your minimum. If you can, of course, 80 would be great, but 70 should be the minimum score you should achieve. And yeah, you can find those recommendations just down below when you conduct the search. So next, again, another important topic from my point of view when it comes to traffic. So there are a couple of trends we are seeing, globally speaking, but again, also more specifically even for Sub-Saharan Africa. So what I normally say is social, local, and mobile. What do I mean with that? First of all, when it comes to traffic generation, I don't know if you're aware and if you check your accounts regularly, but you can actually see if you check the CPM and you sort it in your performance report by country, you might notice that the CPMs for a lot of the foreign or international traffic is much higher. And on average, we see a 4 to 5% higher eCPM for a user that, let's say, comes from the UK, Canada, America, Germany, France, wherever. And this is obviously most likely will be diaspora traffic. So if you're from Nigeria, there are a lot of Nigerians, of course, living in America, living in Canada, UK, and so forth. If you're in Senegal or South Africa or Kenya, the same story. We all know that the diaspora is very, very active. The African diaspora is probably one of the most active ones in the world. And you can actually benefit from that. But a lot of my clients don't actually focus on that a lot. So this is something I would highly encourage you to do. Try to even tailor your content towards the diaspora traffic, because acquiring one user from abroad is as valuable as 4 or 5 locally speaking. Second thing is social, and that shouldn't be a surprise to you as well. I think in your local markets, social platforms, social media is huge. So your strategy of traffic generation and diversification should certainly include social as well. One important, maybe quick point on this one here, a lot of publishers think all I need to do is create a Facebook page or Twitter account, and I just retweet or repost the articles or the content I share on my website. And you couldn't be further from the truth. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. So you need to make sure that your social strategy differs from your content or web strategy, right? So you don't just want to be posting the links to your site. That might generate a bit of traffic, but it doesn't really get you that sort of viral effect or that exponential growth that you really want to get from social, and that you can get, by the way. The biggest growth rates we see at the moment in terms of traffic is from social. So our largest publishers globally speaking in Google, generate the most traffic at this point, growth-wise at least, from social. So what you need to do, try to increase engagement of your users. So launch campaigns, launch competitions that work really well. If you just, I don't know, give them an iPad to win or something, to ask for their feedback or for sharing something or for following you back, or opinions, start having controversial discussions about topics or about things that are going on in your country. And that way you can really, that's what people use social media for, right? Not a lot of people just go to Facebook to read the news. So if you're a news site and you're just sharing your articles, that doesn't really have that effect you want. You really want to be, engage your users on social. And then next is also local. So what I mean by that is customizing your content to each user. So for example, again, another good example is when it comes to a news site, you might want to have categories by the state or by regions of your country. Again, users identify more with your site, if they feel the content is actually customized towards them. And again, you could also have this differentiation between diaspora versus home traffic. So really try to customize content, whatever site you are, as much as you can. And then lastly, mobile, again, mentioned it before, and I'll mention it a few times throughout the presentation now. Mobile is king, especially in your regions, wherever you are on the continent. You have to also try and somehow, other than just the technical side, even content-wise, you can actually create content for people that are on the go, right? So in the morning, for example, during rush hours, morning and evenings, you want to be launching certain things that are maybe relevant to people being in public transport, right? Or being maybe in the city. So just think about, again, given your site, given your country, and some other context maybe around it, how can you really tailor content towards your users, which are mostly on mobile phones, or at least smartphones and tablets. So much for traffic generation and I guess user focus. Coming to actual sort of hardcore optimization of your AdSense account and AdSense placement. Number one, of course, are placements, right? So where you put your ads. I've seen, I would say, almost everything by now. I've seen many different sites, many different very creative ways sometimes of placing your ads. Not all of that obviously works, although it might be intuitive sometimes. Generally speaking, of course, above the fold works better because a lot of users, they might not be scrolling down a lot. So you, of course, always want to make sure that your ads are as high as you can. That doesn't mean to put 5 ads around your title. That, I guess, is needless to say, doesn't really work as well. But obviously, just get an under. What I always say, people ask me, okay, where exactly is it best? Because this obviously, the answer to this totally depends on your site and the design of your site, the content and everything. So what I would say is really try to get an understanding of where your users are on your site. What is this most viewed content on your page, right? You can use, obviously, Google Analytics for this. It's probably the best free tool you can have. And then try to place your ads around that. But obviously, don't overdo it. One thing I want to highlight here is you might have seen it in your account. There's something called the active viewability metric. It's called active view, which if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check out. Basically shows you what percentage of the ads are actually seen by users. And the way we measure this, just as a background information to you, is if 50% of the ad is seen longer than 1 second, then we consider it to be viewable. Because obviously, if your ads are not viewable, there's not going to be any clicks for advertisers. Therefore, advertisers are going to stop investing because they're not getting any conversions. So you will want to make sure that your ads are as viewable as possible, if that makes sense. Next is coverage. Again, another, of course, important topic. You know that the limit is 3 ads per page. And I mentioned it before, of course, you want to put it on the most visited pages. But on the other hand, you also don't want to overdo it. There are a lot of problems with that, not just our policies, of course. It is against our policies to put more than that. But even from a user experience point of view, and overall revenues will eventually actually drop. So that is something I would, of course, encourage you to pay attention to. But if you have less than 3 units, you might want to consider putting an additional ad unit on your page to make sure you use that limit of 3. Now, coming to the actual ad sizes, just a quick note on that. Basically, I would always recommend, obviously, trying to find the largest possible size you can put on your site. Why I'm saying this, there's several reasons. Number one, of course, it is more attractive for a user, the larger the size is. So for the example of the rectangle, if you can see the 2 sizes there, of course, a user might feel more attracted by the 336 by 280 rather than the 300 by 250. The second reason, though, for this is actually that also for the advertisers, it is more interesting to have larger ad units because they can display better ads. And especially if we have very big campaigns, when there's a new movie launch or there's a car launch, those big advertisers that pay very high CPMs are also more interested in larger sizes. So try to play around with it. See, of course, where within your canvas of your site, where you can increase the ad size and where it's possible. Even if you're in the process, for example, of redesigning your site, 2016, it's still the beginning. It's a great time maybe to think about this. Try to, from the get-go, try to imagine what type of ad could fit in where, and maybe see if you might need to increase the pixel sizes of ad placements to fit larger ad sizes. Another very important thing talking about the advertisers, because as you can see, there's only so much you can do, of course, on your side. A lot also depends on the advertisers, but one of the few things you can do, of course, is also to make sure that you don't block a lot of the advertisers or technologies we can provide. So, for example, to always allow text and image ads. If you block any categories or networks, try to limit that to the absolute necessary. You need to have a really good reason why you want to block a certain advertiser or network or technology, because otherwise it will reduce the auction pressure, and that will obviously in turn reduce your eCPM. If you need to block certain ads, I would always rather go through the ad review center and try to find the individual ads. That might be a little bit more cumbersome maybe, but it is definitely, in terms of the auction pressure and in terms of your revenues, it is definitely worth the time investing in rather going through one by one than just blocking entire categories. Now, I want to talk to you today also about some exciting new trends, I guess. And we have some additional ad formats that I want to talk to you about. Most of our recent innovations, I guess, are mostly surrounding mobile, right? But I want to talk to you today about some other ones first, and we'll come to the mobile ones, which I'm sure you've heard about. So the first one, again, this is something really, really exciting, has been working super well in Europe for a lot of the large publishers, is what we call the matched content. Okay, what the matched content beta or launch basically is, these are ads that take content from your site. Okay, so again, maybe particularly applicable to news sites, but I think also to entertainment sites, blogs, and so forth. So matched content, think about the typical Legatus, Plister, and so forth, Taboola ad units you might have on your site. Here, actually, we're going to help you increase the engagement on your site. And part of our ranking of sites as well is the time spent on the site and the engagement the users actually experience, the clicks and so forth, how long people actually stay on your site to read articles. So matched content, what it does, it takes content from your site, and you can put it below articles or below certain pages, and users then can click on it to go further down in your site and read more articles and more articles. Important to mention, this is not yet available across all accounts and all countries. So I just obviously wanted to highlight it at this point so you know what's coming. But don't be afraid or don't be disappointed if it's not yet in your account. These are things that we might be launching over time. And also very exciting news, and this is, by the way, not yet available to the entire continent, but we are starting to test with a monetization element to that, because right now this feature is only for engagement. So you're not going to generate any revenue, but you're going to increase, of course, your engagement on this, but we're testing monetization on this. And the second thing, I guess, and this should be probably more familiar to most of you, are the link units. Where it makes sense, put them, of course. Really think about it, though, because I've seen more bad implementation of link units than good ones. I don't believe they're always good. They might just sort of make your site look a little bit dodgy, or so be very careful with those. But of course, if it fits, it could be a nice little addition to your ad units. Now, I mentioned a few times now mobile, so we really want to stress this today even more, even when it comes to monetization. I think these shouldn't be new numbers to you, but even globally speaking, about 21% of all internet users are via the smartphones. In sub-Saharan Africa, this number is around actually 70 to 80%. So you can see the difference and why, especially in your region, it is absolutely crucial that you focus not just your site, but also your monetization strategy on mobile. You want to obviously build, as we say here, for the multi-screen viewer. So, on the way to work, they might be on their mobile phone. Later on, maybe they might have a tablet or a feature phone, of course. At work, they might be using their computer or laptop, and then home again, their phone. So you want to be able to address all of these different situations where users are. And again, a couple of very general, of course, best practices. Best practices doesn't really differ too much from desktop, of course. Very easy to use. It needs to be fast, of course. And you should ideally test your own site so that you know actually how it works. If all the features, let's say, that you might want to have there. If you have videos, you want to make sure that the videos play out. If you have galleries, you want to make sure that the pictures don't go wider than your canvas and so forth. I think it's obvious, and we all know this from our own experience. If you have a great experience on the site, you want to come back to that site. So at least 74% globally speaking said that obviously they're more likely to return to a site if they had a great experience and the site was optimized for mobile. This is a lot of text, and I don't want you to focus on it too much. Basically here, the idea is there are 3 different ways to go multi-screen. Number one, you can see it's a separate mobile site. Obviously, these are 2 different elements. You're working with 2 different codes and so forth. There are pros and cons for each of them. Of course, more customization possible on the mobile side, and easier for you to make maybe changes, but also you have different URLs, and it's very hard for you to keep track of the same content, and users might be a bit confused if there's different content on the 2. You have the responsive web design, which we would, of course, highly recommend. Easy because it's the same HTML and CSS in a single URL, very customizable for you as well. Of course, that the big con there is that it's very, very heavy in terms of resources, time, and financial resources for you to implement. So this is something you have to see, of course, if you either have the knowledge yourself or you're happy to invest. And then lastly is the dynamic serving, which is a topic that we normally don't go into too much, very technical, but you can Google and find out a bit more about this if you're interested and you think this could be a solution for you. We do have a couple of recommended vendors, and what I would actually advise you to do is just go to the link down there below, google.com/think/multiscreen, and you'll find all this information plus much more on multi-screen, how to go responsive, how to go mobile, and so forth. Now, when it comes to monetization, though, how do you actually make the most out of your mobile sites? Because we said most of the traffic is there, so you should also be making most out of it, financially speaking. So a couple of best practices when it comes to plain ad implementation. We all know the mobile banner, which are traditionally 320 by 50. And obviously, you should make sure that you have them as well. Although what we've recently, I think early last year, we've launched a new ad unit for mobile devices, which is the 320 by 100. And we've actually seen a quite significant increase in CPM for those ad units. So where you can, or where you have existing banners, try out, run some tests, maybe some A/B tests, experiments in AdSense, where you replace your 320 by 50 with a 320 by 100. Also, needless to say that your ad units, at least the banner should be above the fold to get obviously the best out of it, the highest click rates, because even on mobile, of course, users drop out quite easily. Social sharing is quite important for mobile as well. I think a lot of mobile sites live off the sort of viral effect of social media. Another thing to make sure, the tricky thing, of course, now with mobile sites is this, literally speaking, the space of the site is, of course, very limited. So not only you have a bit of an issue with content, you have to really be creative sometimes of how to aggregate and really allocate your content. But also when it comes to the ads, there are some issues. So for example, if you place your ads too close to certain navigational parts of your content, right? So if I say you can click next on your site or next article, and the ad is very close to that, people with big fingers like myself, might accidentally click on the ad and then only realize that, close the window again, come back to your site. Unfortunately, if that happens a lot, our system might detect this as click spam, which is not only good for you in terms of, that's a bad user experience and the user might really not like your site and never come back again. But of course, even from our end, from the AdSense perspective, we register a lot of click spam. That might reduce your ranking when it comes to monetization and CPMs and so forth. And it might actually eventually lead to a policy warning on our end. So this is something to please keep in mind. When you place the ads on the mobile site, make sure they don't interfere with any of your navigational elements on your site. So that they're clearly, if somebody clicks on the ad, that should have been an intention to do so and not accidental. And lastly, this is probably one of my favorites for mobile, and this is something, if you're not doing it, I want you, as soon as this finishes, I want you to go and implement it, because the revenue increase, the eCPM increase we've seen are absolutely insane. A 300 by 250, right, might not be the most intuitive thing to do, and I know a lot of you might have this already, but if you have not, this is something you should definitely try out. Very, very interesting, not only because it fits perfectly with the mobile screen, so a very, very intuitive user experience, but 300 by 250 is also one of the sort of best performing ads, generally speaking, globally. So the majority of advertisers, if they don't have a 300 by 250 medium rectangle ad, they're not a large advertiser. All the big names, all the big brands, agencies, retargeters focus on the 300 by 250. So for you to open up that opportunity on your mobile site is going to be a big game changer. So definitely try to implement that. The last one that is not here that I would mention is, if your site is a little bit longer, also make sure that you include maybe another banner further down below. So you can have one banner on the top, one in the middle, and then the rectangle at the bottom. That's normally what I would recommend for mobile sites. And you might have seen also in your AdSense account, we do have the responsive ad units, which is quite nice for you because it reduces the work, of course, you have in terms of always adjusting sizes and implementing different codes. Definitely try them out. I have seen instances where the sizes that our systems detect might not really be that great, or they don't look so good. So what I would recommend normally to my clients is try them out. If you like the sizes, brilliant, go ahead, because it's super easy for you to do. You can still get the same reporting if you just go by ad unit and by ad size. But if it doesn't look quite good, or you're not quite happy with it, I would rather recommend focusing on the if-else command for a responsive site, and then try to implement your ads with that code, so that you can actually determine for a mobile, if it's a mobile device, these are the ad units that should be placed, and so forth, right? It's a little bit more work, but of course it could make the difference, that you really want to see in terms of eCPMs and therefore revenue for you. So I would just test them out. And now this is something really, really exciting. And again, just a disclaimer up front. Again, this is not something that will be available to everybody. And please, it will come probably with time. It is also, of course, a little bit of an issue or question of how much you're already making. We don't want to be providing certain features immediately to smaller publishers, but of course, eventually we will be integrating them. It's the page level ads, what we call page level ads. Basically, it's a combination of anchor and vignette ads. The good thing about them is they do not count towards your 3 ads per page limit. so that's great. They do only serve on high-end mobile devices. And no, in the majority of your markets, I guess feature phones and low-end devices are still sort of the majority of the market share. But we also know that the growth rates are quite promising. So I think the uptake there will be quite great. So to go into them for a little bit, page level ads, what do they mean? Anchor ads, as the name suggests, it's a banner size that anchors at the bottom of your mobile site and stays there. So if the user scrolls, the ad will stay down there. It is intuitive because the user can easily dismiss it either via a cross or just by swiping it, right? So there shouldn't be any issues with click spam. And in most cases, we have seen a quite nice increase in RPM. And as I said, it's in addition to your 3 ads per page limit. And secondly, what we call vignette ads, basically think of that as your interstitial. It's a mobile interstitial. So in the app world, we have interstitials, which basically mean full screen ads. Same here. Good thing again, very, very intuitive, because you can see there in the animation, there's a little arrow that from YouTube. So everybody by now, I think, has been on YouTube. We know what this button means, that you can skip the ad. So again, no issues with click spam. But one important thing to stress here is that because we're still testing those things, for those of you who have them in their account, if you go under My Ads, you should see them on the left side, page level ads. Is that the vignette ads, so the full screen ads, are actually capped on our end. So if you implement them, and I would encourage you to do so if you have the opportunity, the problem is we actually capped them with roughly 2 to 3% of all your users are only going to see that. Right? So you're not going to immediately see a huge increase in revenues, but obviously it's a process, and we might be removing that cap at some point as well, but just to keep the expectations right. One question I often get asked is multi-screen versus mobile app, which is right for me. Some of you might have similar questions or thoughts. Should I invest in developing an app or not? These are what you can see now. These are some general pros and cons for both sides. What I normally prefer to say is, think about it that way. A user who uses your app is a very loyal user who wants to come back to your site. It's a returning customer, who definitely likes what he's seeing and wants to see the content on a regular basis. For mobile side, this can be the case, but doesn't have to be the case. Could also be, if you have, for example, more search traffic, could just be that by chance people land on your site. So what I will do is check your traffic split. If you have a lot of direct traffic, that means a lot of people actually come to your site directly, they're loyal to your site, they love your site, then it might be worth investing in an app. But if you only live off referral, social, or search traffic, then I would probably not go for an app so much, because that means people just come to your site by chance because maybe one thing went viral or a friend recommended it, but they're not necessarily might be coming back to you. So this is sort of the more general advice I would give. And also the problem with apps we see is there's a lot of uptake, of course, in sub-Saharan Africa, but also the active user numbers are not there yet. So we're still trying to, obviously help a lot of the app developers to create content that engages users. A lot of people download an app, but either never open it, or they open it only once. So the users that actually engage in apps in the long run are much less than obviously people downloading an app. So that's why I would be a bit careful. Make sure it's worth your time when you invest in an app. And then just to highlight a few other ways of monetizing your site, we know the normal AdSense for content. Now, this might be things you already heard of, but just to put it out there again to investigate for you if you feel like this might be suitable for your site. We do have AdSense for search, meaning if you have a site where people search a lot on your site, so let's say an e-commerce site or a price comparison site and so on, there's a chance for you to apply to get the AdSense for search or custom search engine on your site, which means you will be able to provide your users with a search box. You can see they can search on your site, and you will be given sort of Google lookalike results from your site, of course, but it will include ads as well. So there's also a way for you to earn revenue from that, actually. Next is the AdSense for games. Again, this is obviously might not even be applicable to anybody out there, but if you have a site that has a lot of games, and if you're, let's say, a game site, then we do actually have a feature called AdSense for Games, where you're able to integrate advertising into your game. So when people play it, there will be either rectangle scene in the middle, there will be in-stream, skippable ads, and so forth, TrueView. And then also that links nicely into the AdSense for video, which is basically the same. So if you have a lot of native video player content, so you're actually using your own video player, not YouTube, because then of course you can have ads there with your normal AdSense account. But if you use your own video player and you have a lot of content, you might be eligible for AdSense for video, where again you can integrate full slot, overlays, in-stream, skippable, and so forth advertising, and could be a nice, again, a new nice revenue stream for you. So this is it from my end for now. These were just some general best practices for AdSense. I hope this was useful for one or two of you. As I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of you actually have submitted questions beforehand, but also just now during the session, I've been seeing here lots of things popping up. So I'm very excited to go through some of them. I have selected, I think, 3 previously, because those were the ones that have been asked repeatedly. So a lot of you are interested seemingly in those topics. So I'm just going to go through them quickly, hopefully, and then I'll try to answer some live questions from you. So the first question, and I've paraphrased this a little bit to combine a lot of your questions. So the first question was, why do other sites place more than the allowed 3 ads per page, yet they aren't penalized for it? Now, this is obviously a very, very hot topic, I guess, for a lot of you. You might be absolutely compliant to our policies. You only have 3 ads on your site, and you go on other sites and you see they're having 10, 12, whatever, ads on their site, and it might be a bit frustrating. Now, first of all, it is absolutely our policy that you're only allowed to have 3 ads on your site. And we do check that, of course. Now, there are, of course, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of sites that come online every day. And some of the sites might only be up for a few days of revenue because they know they're not compliant to our policies. And we can't, of course, be following, or we can't be finding those sites all the time. But I can guarantee you we have teams that obviously look after this, and we do investigate these things. But it is, of course, not possible to do this all the time, right? But I can only encourage you, especially if you're, if you're interested in growing your account, if you're interested maybe also in the future becoming one of our premium partners, where you'll, might be receiving some more sort of one-to-one account management or more support, you definitely have to comply to our policies. I would generally not recommend comparing yourself to any other sites. Every site is different, right? But generally speaking, again, I can only recommend absolutely adhering to our policies. And if somebody thinks they're not penalized, well, you don't really know, of course, what happens at the back end. I can guarantee you, we're seeing this here. There are dozens and dozens and hundreds probably of warnings being sent out every day. So that's I guess, hopefully, that hopefully maybe it should give you a little bit of reassurance. But yeah, please you have to comply to our policies. Otherwise, we might shut your account down, and nobody wants this. Now, the next question that came up a lot, you've probably seen this in your own account if you check your CPCs yourself. Now, CPC, for those of you who don't know this, is obviously the cost per click, which basically indicates how much the advertisers on the advertising side are willing to pay for an ad. And it is true that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, a sharp drop in that. Now, what are the reasons for this and when we're going to see an improvement? Number one, there are basically 2 reasons. The first reason is that it is the post-Christmas period. A lot of advertisers have a huge advertising budget around leading up to Christmas, so sort of end November, early December. That's where a lot of the advertisers spend most of their annual budget, actually. But then you can imagine, of course, afterwards, it's absolutely quiet. So the first few weeks after Christmas, it is absolutely normal for us to unfortunately see a sharp drop in CPC, which therefore leads to also a drop in our CPM for all our publishers. Now, when do we see an improvement of this? In some cases, it's already happening in some countries. In others, it might take a little bit more time to see this. Now, obviously, the particular question was asked for Nigeria. And Nigeria is, of course, the largest market at this point when it comes to advertising in the region. Now, for Nigeria, there's a very specific case, of course, is also relating to the current economic situation, political situation. Some of you might be from Nigeria, you're familiar with this. There are a lot of restrictions put in place that also limit our advertisers at the moment to spend. Therefore, the CPCs drop, and unfortunately, it's also affecting you guys as a publisher. So, this is obviously something we can influence. So I don't know, nobody can tell you really, I guess, when this is going to change. But this is also the second reason, at least for Nigeria specifically, why the CPCs haven't yet picked up, because political and economic situation doesn't allow this at this point. So jumping to the next question, again, very, very interesting question. And I chose this not only because a lot of people have asked similar questions, but I think it is very important to understand. So the question is, My RPM, CTR are always very poor. RPM this year, I guess last year, was mostly at $1 to $2, and CTR around 0 to 1%. These have really reduced my earnings. Please, what should I do to improve? What I would like to say to this is, first of all, it's interesting for me to see sometimes when people say, okay, I'm performing really badly with $1 or $2 or click rates of 0 to 1%. I mean, these numbers are not actually very bad. I mean, if you have a CPM of $1 to $2, depending on your site, that actually can be a very good metric. Click rates are rarely much higher than, I mean, we would say, depending on your site, click rates should be between 1–2% maybe, right? But in many, many cases, it's actually, especially in the continent right now, is actually under 1%. So it's not, if I look at the numbers, I wouldn't say these are particularly bad numbers. If, of course, now you can see a trend in your account where if you only look at RPM, it has consistently been dropping. First, of course, I would tell you to probably have a look, is it caused by the click rate or by the CPC? Because again, RPM can drop because of both of those reasons. Could be either the click rate or the CPC. If it's the CPC, we've just talked about it. It could also be a case where the advertising market in your country has maybe reduced or isn't growing as fast. If it's a CTR question, I would think about obviously things like, have you changed anything in your placements? If that is not the case, there have also been some questions around ad fatigue. So if click rates have decreased recently or in the last couple of months, it could also mean that your advertisers are just, your users are used to your site. They know where the ads are. So obviously less people will click on this. And this again is the problem increases for publishers or sites that rely mostly on direct traffic. So if you have returning customers, returning users, they know at some point where the ads are, so they're not going to click. So then, of course, I would say, try to play around a little with the ads again. Try to reposition them to different places. Try to come up with new sizes. Maybe I talked about this earlier. Think about a redesign. If you haven't redesigned your site for the last 2 years or so, I mean, this is, I would say, something easy, to do and can make a huge difference. Okay, but generally speaking, yeah, always think for your own account. Don't necessarily compare yourself to other accounts, because you just never know what is good or not, and every site is different. Every AdSense account can be different. So one site, $1 CPM can be great. On the next side, it could be very, very bad, right? So this is what I would say to that question. Now let's check some more questions here. I'm just going to look in and see what we got here. I see many, many responses and questions. So what is it that my AdSense account dropped down completely? I mean, those obviously very specific account questions at this point. I wouldn't be able to answer on the Hangout on air. I guess you can understand. But this obviously you would have to investigate further yourself. Now let's check again. We have some more questions here. Okay, perfect. Now this is something about the speed. I love page speed insights and it has helped me a lot, but most times the solutions recommended can only be implemented by a web developer. Is there anything a non-tech blogger can do to improve page speed? Now, again, I'm not a web developer and I'm not a technical guy, so this is also can be a very specific I guess a specific question. It depends a little bit on what, I guess, backend you use and what system you use. I mean, I've played around myself a little bit with WordPress. There are, of course, certain tools that you can include there as well that would help you achieve that without having to, I guess, talk to a web developer. Same for Blogger. But again, generally speaking, if you're not a very technical or a non-tech blogger, I unfortunately would advise you, it is worth the investment. If there are things that are really crucial, let's say certain technical terms or compressing your images or working on your CSS and so forth, it really is worth the investment. If it costs you a couple of $100 or more, in the long run, I truly believe that it is worth doing it. So yes, so that's, I guess, all I can say. Really focus on the speed. It is important. And unfortunately, it does take some investment on your end as well in that case, if you're not technical yourself. So let's go on. We have some more questions. They're popping in. Brilliant. Keep it going. Okay, we still have some time. So down below, there's the link. So if you have any question, no question is too stupid. Please feel free to share anything. I'll try to go through as many as I can. You have a 3 ad limit per page. If you have 1 ad unit only showing for mobile and 1 for display, will it count as 2 ads? So we consider every page as it appears on its own. right? So for example, if it's on a mobile phone or a user opens out on a mobile phone, whatever is on that particular site then, that's what we count as an ad, right? If the user opens on desktop and there's only one ad then showing on desktop, that's only one ad, right? So obviously our systems do detect, I guess, your code. It depends, of course, a little bit how you've implemented it. It has to be a clean implementation. So as I said earlier, if you want to have something like this, where a particular ad unit, only one should show for the mobile side and only one for desktop, you would have to work, of course, with the responsive ad codes, right? So it's called the if-else parameter. You can Google this maybe. So it has to be technically clean, that you tell, of course, our robots, our query tools, that when the device size is X to Z in terms of pixels, right? It's between so-and-so pixels, that then only this ad unit should show. But if the device size is between another different two sizes, it should show the second ad, right? So if you implement it cleanly, our system should definitely only detect one ad per device. I hope this answers the question. Now let's go on. Some more questions coming up. Let's check what we have. Okay, this one I think was answered, so we'll do some more. Yeah, again, RPM. A lot of people are asking about the RPM, and especially in January. I think this goes back to the question I answered earlier. It is post-Christmas, unfortunately. So meaning that the CPCs, especially the CPCs, have reduced post-Christmas, and that obviously does affect your RPM and therefore your earnings as well. Now, let's see. Social media traffic. So one interesting question is, my question is more channeled towards social media traffic. Is it against policy to promote one's website on Facebook and Twitter? AdSense help forums have divergent responsive. So what I can tell you, it is absolutely not against policy. We actually encourage that. So I think at Google, we are very, very transparent and open. And I'm not gonna lie to you. If I talk about social strategy, I'm not gonna tell you to go to Google+. Okay, and this might be shocking to some of you, but we all know we have to face facts. And reality is, of course, that the majority of the social traffic is on things like Facebook, Twitter, maybe even Instagram, depending on your site. I can highly recommend that, Pinterest, and so forth. So it is absolutely not against policies. I would encourage you to do so. I talked about it earlier. I would even go as far as telling you that you have to have a very elaborate Facebook strategy, for example, customizing content there to the different maybe regions. As I said, in maybe Kenya, you want to do it by state, or in South Africa as well, by region. You want to have a Facebook page of your site for KwaZulu-Natal, for the Western Cape, for the Eastern Cape, and so forth, Limpopo and whatnot. And again, Nigeria, you might want to have this for a different Facebook group per state as well, where you can then use this to customize the content to the different users, because a user is, of course, more likely to follow your Facebook page if he or she really sees a value in doing so. So if you have very localized content to his or her region, or where he or she is from, then they're more likely to, of course, follow you. So absolutely not against policies on either of the platforms. So I would highly encourage you to do so and have a presence on all of those platforms, actually, in fact. Now, this might be another one that a lot of you are interested in. It's a second or third time I'm seeing this now. What are the requirements to become a premium publisher? Now, this is something maybe some of you might have heard about or maybe read about. It's true, of course, we do have premium publishers, and we do have a program where very large accounts, very large companies and sites do get special account management with us. And this is pretty much what I do. So at the end of the day, I'm currently the account manager, if you want, the senior manager for our large publishers. What this involves, of course, is regular contact and some more customized, I guess, advice and business advice. Now, there's nothing really you can do at this point, at least not something sort of in terms of hard metrics to achieve this. What I would tell you is, obviously, you need to focus on growing. At the end of the day, even for Google, of course, we're interested in working with reliable, with high-quality publishers that are eager to grow, that are eager to work with us, and willing to, of course, experiment. Google is a very sort of fast-living, experimental company. So we also look for publishers who don't just want to, are not just happy with what they're doing, who are hungry to do more. Of course, you need to be a certain size, as you can understand. We can't be, working with all small sorts of publishers. But again, there's no number per se. I can't tell you now, as soon as you make X amount, that you're going to be working with us. Just focus on growing. And the way it would work is, though, you can't apply for this in any way. You have to, we will actually contact you. Okay. So if in the future you'll be eligible for this, or you'll be able and have the size, we will actually contact you to reach out to you, to have an initial discussion, and then see obviously where we can take this from now, or whether maybe the premium program isn't applicable for you at this point, or isn't even of benefit to you, because it does, as I said, it does also require quite a lot of input from your end. It's not just going to be us telling you all the time what to do. It needs to be a win-win situation for both sides. I hope this helps and puts all rumors at rest at this point. So more questions coming up. This is brilliant. Let me see what is coming up consistently. Why do AdSense earnings change so much? I mean, it totally depends on what the reason behind it is. It could be your traffic, right? As I said earlier, it could be CPC, CTRs. If you had a lot of policy problems recently, of course, that also does affect the quality of your site in a way for us. If we see you get a lot of policy violations, then it can't be a very interesting site, and we don't necessarily want to put the high valuable ads there. So earnings can, of course, change, but it does totally depend. You need to go into your AdSense account. This is maybe something I would recommend to most of you, is to really go into your performance reports and don't just look at the revenue. I know at the end of the day, we all want to make money. I can understand that. But in order for you to even know how to make more money, you need to really understand where the revenue is coming from at any given point. And if something changes, you need to understand where that change is coming from too. So I would encourage you to spend more time in your performance reports in your AdSense account, really play around with the metrics, really investigate further deeper, go by size, go by country, by URL, by ad unit name, maybe even by buyer network, and really understand exactly what the reason for a certain change is. As I said, could be many, many different reasons. But that's, of course, why earnings can change drastically. All right. Is there a way I can determine what the average RPM is for my region? I want to know if my RPM is good, bad, or average. There is no, let's say, tool that we provide, unfortunately, I guess, at least from your side. No, so there's no real way for you to really know. I mean, what I can encourage you to do, and I've seen in some regions actually great collaboration between publishers. At some point, of course, you are a competition, but on the other hand, also you can help each other a lot. And I've been recently, end of last year, I've been in Nigeria and had a couple of events there, and it was incredible actually. The way it ended up was a lot of the publishers there were exchanging business cards. They were talking to each other. One person had a problem. I didn't need to answer that problem because somebody else actually raised their hands and was like, I had the problem last year myself. This is how I solved it. What I'm trying to say is, see if you can maybe get involved in some of the forums. If you can see if you can get involved locally in whatever market you are. Tanzania, Ethiopia, Ghana. In most of those countries, we do have small groups of Google clients, publishers, or Google developers. And just talk to them. Again, don't be shy to talk to publishers. As I said, in as much as they're competition, but they can also be very, very useful, and both sides can benefit. You might have some experience in one thing that the other publisher doesn't have. So then you can give it to him or her. So that's the only thing I can say. Again, we don't provide those sort of numbers. But also another thing I would say, what I've seen unfortunately a lot, is don't immediately trust when people tell you what they're earning, because I can guarantee you that in 99% of the cases, they exaggerate. And this is obviously not to blame anybody, but I've seen it especially in forums, and people come back to me or email me, or when I meet them, they say, oh, but he or she said they're earning $5 CPM, or something like this. Don't believe that straightforward. Don't believe everything you read. Get involved in forums. Try to get involved locally with your community. There might be advertising associations, and similar things, and try to get involved there, and go to meetings, maybe if they have events, conferences, and then you can get to speak to actually publishers. That's the only way I can say, I guess, to get a sense of what's maybe average in your market, unfortunately. Let me see. There are a couple of more questions here that popped up in the last few minutes. Okay, another one that is, I guess, important due to the mobile focus is, are responsive ads less effective than fixed sizes in terms of revenue? Now, this is what I said earlier about you should have to test it, because It can be, absolutely, right? That's even why I said you want to test it and wait, see the results, because there can be cases where, yes, our system might think or might say, okay, this size is probably the best ad unit in terms of the size for your page, but turns out actually, you know, if you had a different size, you would have made more revenue. So it can happen. Responsive ad units are really great, I think, also for maybe a publisher who doesn't have enough time or the resources necessarily to do this exactly, like to exactly measure in which device format now what ad unit fits. You know, it's obviously it's a bit easier to do, I guess. But of course, if you have the resources, you know how to do it, it could be worth testing this out, because yes, other ad sizes might actually be better. But of course, it's harder than to implement for you. Let's go through some more. I think we still have a couple of minutes. Again, if you have anything, feel free to shoot it out here. There are a couple of questions in French, and I do apologize at this point. I don't speak fluent French, so what I can promise you, I can try and follow up maybe with that later, I hope. And we don't have anybody here right now, I think, who could answer that. So apologies for that. We will try, though, to answer them for you. How can we increase CPC? I hope that question was answered earlier. Like, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do, or even I can do, or Google in itself can do. It is obviously based on the advertising industry in your country. So to the extent of how advertisers, you know, spend their money, how much they're going online, how much money they spend online versus maybe radio, TV, or newspaper ads, and so forth. So there's nothing really, I can promise you, nothing you can do really. All you can do is work on the content of your site. If the quality of your site is better, the better the ads will be on your site. Another question, where can I get data on the highest paying ads in Kenya/Africa? Now, that question for me, I would ask you, of course, do you mean by size, or because again, you know, this is not necessarily something, you know, there's not really any tool for this, I guess. What I can tell you is that overall, the best performing ad sizes, as I mentioned earlier, of course, things like the medium rectangle, so 300 by 250, the leaderboard for desktop pages, 728 by 90, and very well as well are is the skyscraper, medium skyscraper, the 160 by 600. If you have the space, also test out the 300 by 600. It's a bit wider, but also performs really, really well. And of course, for mobile devices, I've said it earlier, it's the 320 by 100 that I would recommend you implementing. I hope that was your question. I don't know, maybe you meant it slightly different, but I hope I addressed that. Maybe I think time for two more. Anybody for some last two questions? There's one. Does a traffic source determine a publisher's RPM? No, not per se, right? So the nature of the traffic source itself does not necessarily determine RPM. There can be other reasons, of course, that will then eventually, that maybe the nature of most users, let's say, that come through social, right? And that's what causes maybe a different RPM. But you know, we have over 200 different metrics that determine all our in our computers. So not one indicator can be the determining factor. A lot of different factors play a role when determining, you know, your RPM. So yeah, but there's nothing like where I can say for sure, you know, referral traffic or so on is definitely more valuable or not. Does an ad in the header count towards the 3 count limit? Now, this obviously is, I'm not sure I fully understand that, because if you're talking about the actual site, your website, of course, I mean, anything in your header, this is part of the site. It all depends. What we look at is what the users see at the end of the day. So as soon as you display an ad on your site with our tools or with our code, well, that's obviously what we count as an ad. So that I guess, you know, hopefully answers your question. When you talk about implementing the ads in your actual in the header section of your code, your page source code, then I think we're talking about very different things. We would be going into the whole ad serving space, where, you know, you implement your the server codes into a header and so forth. But this would be probably I guess, you know, we'll be a bit beyond that session, and we will have Hangouts obviously on that topic later on in this year, or actually in the next couple of weeks. Now, I would say last question, I'll end on a high. Now, there's one question that just popped up, your views on ad blockers. Now, my views on ad blockers is it's obviously not my subjective views, but obviously ad blockers I mean, I guess we can all understand them from a user point of view to some extent, but let's think about it. The reason why ad blockers even came up is because there were too many bad sites out there, spamming people full of ads. And that's the reason why those who obviously now work well and work clean suffer under it. So what I can recommend obviously on your end is just make sure you don't become one of them. Make sure you stay clean. Make sure you keep your sites clean. You can of course work with your own solutions, let's say, of trying to get around it by having little pop-ups, maybe telling your users that if they use ad blockers, that this is obviously your source of income, and that way they won't be able to guarantee, or you won't be able to guarantee, free content in the future. I think a lot of users don't yet understand that this idea of free internet and the usage of your site for free, is still something special, but it's taken for granted. But look, this is something, of course, is going to evolve. There are lots of things surrounding this, of course, but look, it's understandable from a user point of view, but only because there are bad sites out there. This is the problem. So I can just encourage you to, not do that yourself. So I would say at this point, let me just see one quick one I can throw in. Right. Oh, the last one I really like, because this is a topic I mentioned earlier, but I'm going to answer it again. Is it true that it would be better to focus on acquiring international traffic from a revenue-generating perspective than local? Absolutely. And you might think, well, this is unfair, or this is unfortunate. And I agree with you, and I hope it will change in the future, but it is very true. As I said in one of my earlier slides, traffic from our international traffic, not from your local country, is normally 4 to 5 times as valuable as is traffic from your local region or area or country. Now, the only reason for that is that advertisers, let's say that you are from Senegal and you have a Senegalese user sitting in America. Now, why is this person more valuable to you than a Senegalese person sitting in Senegal? The only reason is that, of course, if that IP address, if that user sits in America, the advertisers in America are more likely to target that users. And unfortunately, the advertising ecosystem is still much, much greater in America. So the spend of advertisers there is much bigger. The RPMs or CPMs, of course, then therefore become bigger. And that benefits you on that end, right? It is still a Senegalese user looking at your site, but unfortunately, he or she sits in America, and that's why a lot of retargeters throw in the ads there. And that's why it is more valuable to you. So with that, we have to stop here, unfortunately. Just a few last pointers from my end. First of all, I want to say a big thank you, of course, for attending. I hope it was useful. I hope you took a few points away from it. One thing I want to highlight is that this was the very first Hangout on Air we did for the whole continent on monetization. And I promise you that my colleagues and we will be doing more in the future. Also look out for any events happening locally. We will also be traveling. I'll be traveling soon again, coming down, and my colleagues as well. So check out our Google Plus page, the AdSense Google Plus page. Please check out the AdSense Africa blog for any updates. And lastly, also, I would highly encourage you again, we have a free service down here below. If you click on the link, you can actually download our AdSense guide to mobile success for free. What I personally would like you to do, though, is also give me a quick feedback on the session, okay? Just so we know how it was, and if there's anything we can change or we should change for the future. Other than that, I wish you all a great day, wherever you are right now, to Nairobi, to Lagos, to Dakar, South Africa, Joburg, Cape Town. And I wish you all the best. Have a successful week, and I hope to see you in the next Hangout on Air. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.